For more on this weekend's trade truce and what is next, let's bring in our guest, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and to Mexico, John Negroponte. He also served as Director of National Intelligence and Deputy Secretary of State. And, sir, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
What do you think of where we stand right now in the China trade talks?
Well, better off than we were a few days ago. Better to move forward on these talks, try to find solutions to these problems. One of the things I liked about the president's remarks was he did mention that we're not in a hurry, and these things, I think he's acknowledging that some of these issues are going to take time to work through. They can't just be solved by spectacular moves and photo opportunities. Issues like protection of intellectual property, forced technology transfer, and so forth. Some of the kinds of issues that bother us with Huawei, the national security issues. But they can be dealt with if they're talked through in a thorough manner. And I think that's what the president is signaling, more time to deal with these issues. And I think that's to the good.
Yeah, I was gratified, too, to hear that he's more concerned about getting the right deal than just the timing on this. But then I thought back to what we had been talking about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and that was the idea of China kind of, riding out the clock on this, saying that they didn't want to see any changes happen until 2025, which would be after President Trump's second term if he's reelected, and which is so far down the road you start to wonder if anything ever actually gets accomplished. I don't
think that's possible because this is not only a Trump policy. I think there's bipartisan support for taking a firmer line vis-a-vis China. I think the Chinese would be surprised. If they think that it's just Mr. Trump and his administration, they've got another thought coming. I think I sense strong bipartisan support for some kind of action vis-a-vis China. Another point I'd make, but I think it's a real complicating factor and which makes it much harder than it appears, is that our economies have a certain level of integration. We have $600 billion, $700 billion worth of trade. Decoupling the two economies would be a very difficult thing to do. And this is a significant difference from the Cold War and the Soviet Union, where our economies were never integrated. They were decoupled. So we're dealing with very different situations. And if we try to unscramble this egg, I think there are going to be economic implications, negative ones, for both sides.
Unscramble an egg. Ambassador, thank you for that.
Adding to Joe's list.
Toothpaste out of the tube.
Well,
Genie out of
what
the
do you
bottle. Want? Humpty Dumpty back up together again. Unscramble an egg is impossible. It's impossible. It can never, ever be done. Ever. Can you? That's really good. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you.
We're not done yet.
We're not done yet.
Oh, okay.
We're not done yet. I just
we're still
just writing that down.
You're trying to figure it out, right?
You're gonna hear that again.
Let's talk about the security issues again. You've got a unique perspective on this from your role as the Director of National Intelligence. What about the Huawei situation? Obviously, it's pretty complex. This administration has been going around for a long time telling other nations not to use some of this. Is there a fine line that can be drawn where we do resume some sales of components to Huawei, but you still protect things on a national security level?
I think that's what Mr. Ross and others have been saying, that some of these things you can buy off the shelf in the United States and you can export them under general license. And I think he's suggesting that that's the kind of stuff that we would allow to continue to go to China, but we would build some protections for more sophisticated and higher level technology. But again, this is the kind of stuff that has to be discussed in considerable detail between the two. And let's not forget, Huawei is a big company, and it's actually got a fairly long history of using suppliers here in the United States. And again, that's the unscrambling the egg issue. We're going to have
Ambassador, but the complicated part is that some countries, some of our allies, may feel like they were effectively used in this larger trade negotiation. In that, what they were being told wasn't just don't sell certain components to Huawei. They were told don't do business with Huawei at all. We do not want Huawei to advance as a 5G player around the world because it creates a national security issue, not just with the United States, but all of our Western allies. So the issue or the question becomes, by making that case so forcefully, as the U.S. has done, as Secretary of State Pompeo has done, as he has traveled the world over the past several months on this issue, and then to change course does that affect our ability to influence our allies in the future?
Well, I don't know, and I don't know how significant a change in course this represents. We'll have to wait and see, but it does suggest another point, which is that Mr. Pompeo's initial sort of shot across the bow about how using Huawei, other countries using Huawei might prejudice intelligence relationships, sort of flags it as an issue. It's clearly something that's got to be discussed, and it's got to be hashed through, obviously not only with China, but between ourselves and our allies. The ideal would be, of course, for us to reach a common understanding with allied countries, perhaps the NATO countries or a group like that, the OECD, whatever, on how to deal with these kinds of issues instead of just taking it on unilaterally. I mean, this does suggest a multilateral kind of approach of some kind. Mr.
Ambassador, just the recent overtures and relationship with North Korea, I don't like when I think it gets politicized a little bit at times. I don't know if that's fair. I guess it's the town, Washington, obviously, but a lot of the criticism comes from quarters that and people that had no success at all dealing with North Korea. And I almost hear that if Obama or Clinton or someone had wanted to go to North Korea, they would have, but they didn't want to give the dictators of that country, whether it's the current one or previous ones, they didn't want to give them the photo op to have an American president there. I mean, should we be heartened by what's happening, or should we be insulted that we're rubbing elbows with a murderer? I mean, how do you view it? You can't win for losing if you're Trump a lot of times.
Well, first of all, the regime is a fact of life. We don't like it, but they're there, and they're the entity that has to be dealt with at this point in time, unless you want to advocate regime change. And I don't know if anybody's. I don't know of anybody who's advocating that at this particular moment in time. So they've got the controls, and we got to work with them. Secondly, not much else has worked in the past. We've over the past 25 years, we've gone usually one step forward and then two steps back. They always end up acquiring greater capabilities, whether it's missile technology or in the area of fissionable material and weaponry and so forth, to the point where now they have a lot more weapons than they had before. Iran doesn't even have any weapons. So, I mean, you're talking about the difference between those two countries.
Yeah. I mean, if that had been President Obama, you think he would have gotten a second Nobel Peace Prize if he had those photos to show there? Or?
Well, not just for walking across the border. I mean, let's get a deal. Maybe we can. We have to think about triangulating between Iran and North Korea, too. I mean, basically what I think's got to happen over time is that we've got to improve the Iran agreement to the point where it's something that could also serve as a model for dealing with North Korea. But, you know, persuading countries not to go nuclear is hard. Look at India, look at Pakistan.
They're different, too.
Have you gone to that meeting, Ambassador? I mean, or would have you recommended the president take the meeting or make it happen?
I would have, and especially he's the president. If that's what he wants to do, and in his judgment thinks is the best approach, yes, sir.
Can't win.
Let's make the best of it.
It was better when they were sending those missiles over Japan. Anyway,
I've asked the question because the last time he executed his own negotiator. Not Trump.
I don't think that happened. I think they saw the guy. I think he showed up, actually. It was out last week.